Welcome to the panel discussion on income security for persons with a disability, Part 1. My name is Steve Mantis, and I'll be the moderator. We will continue the discussion on day 4 of the conference and encourage you to join us then as well. Today, we have an expert panel with almost 100 years of experience looking at public policy around income and employment. John Stapleton is an Innovation Fellow with the Metcalf Foundation. He worked for the Ontario government for 28 years in the areas of social assistance policy and operations. He finished his career as a senior policy advisor on the Ontario Disability Support Program. Sherry Torjman is a social policy consultant and policy associate with Maitrey. She is the vice chair of the Disability Advisory Committee, reporting to the Minister of National Revenue. Tom McDowell has his PhD and is an instructor with the Department of Politics and Public Administration at Ryerson University. His research work explores the institutional and policy impacts of neoliberalism. Now, over to you, John.
Okay, good day, everyone. I'm going to give a bit of an overview on the disability income security in Canada. And I'm going to bring up the expenditures that were made in these programs in 2018 and 2019 and try to give a bit of a historical overview. I do this work with a woman by the name of Ann Tweddle in Ottawa, who I've been working with within government and outside of it for the last 44 years. So we have quite a long history and a track record in this. And she does the data, and I guess I'm the one who goes out and presents it and does some of the work in terms of the overall analysis. So we work together. Now, in terms of, okay. Yes, I wanted to just mention as an overview that the throne speech adds a new disability income program for 2020. So that throne speech noted that this new Canada disability benefit is expected to be like the federal guaranteed income supplement program but it's going to be for persons with disabilities. So a few of the questions that I have just to put this in context is, will that program replace social assistance? Will it provide a floor for all people with disabilities, as we expect it to? Will the definition be based on the disability tax credit, the DTC, and the Veterans Disability Programs and the Canada Pension Plan Disability Programs, because the $600 payment that was paid somewhat like a refundable credit to people with disabilities, it's just coming out now, has that definition. And if that definition is understood in federal terms in that way, if so, will social assistance be in place for 50+% of people with disabilities who are poor, who cannot meet those definitions? For example, in Ontario, we have a program called the Ontario Disability Support Program, ODSP, and about 50% of the people would not be able to make that definition based on my best back of the envelope work. And will most of those people with psychoses and neuroses, are those the ones who are going to be missed? In other words, people with mental illnesses where it's been much more difficult to get the disability tax credit, CPPD, and veterans benefits. And then how will the program mesh with the 9 other income security programs in Canada, which are the CPP, disability, EI sickness, the Canada Workers Benefit disability component, the disability tax credit, social assistance, registered disability savings plans, real alphabet soup here, veterans programs, auto accident insurance, private sector plans, and workers' compensation. So these are important, how it's going to mesh with those. But what I'm going to do in these 3 slides, I'm just going to try and give you an overview. And my first part of the overview is the total expenditures on disability income programs in 2018 and 19. And I get that, Anne and I get that from what we call administrative data. It's not from survey data. So we actually take the books of these programs that their accountants put out, and that's the numbers that we come up with. Then I'm going to take you back to about 2005 and show you the increase in these programs over the years. And then I'm going to take you to the hypothesis that I first put out in 2013, that we have seen something called the welfareization of disability incomes. What that means is that social assistance is becoming more and more prominent as the default program, while other programs over time have experienced various different cutbacks. So what I'd like you to think of is maybe 11 or 12 soldiers on a field, and the sergeant comes over and he says, I need one volunteer. And the other 10 or 11 programs step backwards, leaving social assistance as the program that volunteers to be the default program. And that's kind of what's happened. So it's not like social assistance stepped forward. And that's the reason that we see so many people on social assistance disability programs. The political right thinks that this is unsustainable expenditures, whereas I think more progressive view would be that this is a program that's become the default program because other programs have stepped back. So first of all, just in terms of the estimated benefits in 2018-19. Now, this, of course, is pre-COVID. And this pie is not just government, because you can see that on the between 10 and 12 o'clock, we have the private disability insurance programs, which in Canada spend about $7.6 billion. Workers' compensation is almost $6 billion. The social assistance disability component, unfortunately, is the largest single component of that 37.8, almost a third of it. Veterans disability and pension programs, about 2.5. We see EI sickness coming in at about close to 2 billion, CPP at 5.0 billion, and disability tax measures of various sorts, both refundable and non-refundable, coming in at about $3.6 billion. So that's what it looks like. And when you think that the amount of income security pre-COVID-19 was about a little over 190 billion on all programs together. So disability programs in the income security sector have consistently been in the 30 to 35% range of the overall spending on income security in Canada. So that's sort of the big picture from 25,000 feet. And then where have those programs increased and not increased over the period of 2005, that 13 to 14 year period between 2005 and 2019. And you can see that there has been the largest single increase. And this, when I first did the welfareization paper, it was social assistance, the disability component, that was the most prominent amongst those. But in the meantime, disability tax measures have increased by 110%, CPP and QPPD only by about 32%. EI sickness, of course, has become a major factor in disability, although it's a much smaller program, but it has increased over that period of years. Veterans and disability and pension awards, a little over 50%. Once again, you see social assistance always was the largest, and it's at 91.1%. Workers' compensation, where there's been an awful lot of cutbacks in that area, you can see is only about 22%. And we're being brought up, of course, the rear with the private disability programs that have increased by about 70% over that period of time. And so you really get a picture here of where things are going. Now, what we see now is a comparison where we've left social assistance for persons with disabilities has increased by 91%, and that's for social assistance for persons with disabilities has increased over that time, 91, while everything else is about 30%. And then we just take total income support for persons with disabilities, leaving social assistance in, and you can see that that's about 62.4%. And finally, total income support for people when we take the social assistance component out is much more modest. So that would be my way of saying that the welfareization of disability incomes is alive and well and has continued. The analysis on the smaller amounts there on the left over the first time we came up with that hypothesis and what's happened since then. So finally, just to conclude, my comments are that almost 38 billion spent in 2018 and 19 on disability incomes from most sources by 3 levels of government and the private sector. So that's the total amount. Money comes from insurance premiums, general expenditures of governments, and also prominently through payroll taxes for EI, CPP, and workers' compensation. So when we look at a new Canada disability benefit, disentanglement is not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, and pressures will exist hydraulically for the new program to pay more while others pay less. I think that's where you're going to see the pressures. Other programs will try to get out of the disability income business if they think a big federal program is going to be there. So let's keep our eye on that. And although other programs, areas like disability credits have grown the fastest, social assistance with that larger base has grown the most. And if we go back many, many years, it wasn't supposed to be like this. It was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be that social assistance would shrink while the other programs that are better programs would increase. So that's my comments for today. Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you.
Hi. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference, CRWDP, and your partners for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'd also like to acknowledge Minister Carla Qualtrough and the members of the COVID Disability Advisory Committee for all the work that they've been doing recently in putting some of these very, very significant issues on the agenda. And I too would like to acknowledge so many of the conference participants who have worked for so many years, members of the disability community, and my colleagues, John and Tom, Steve, and many, many other colleagues who have really tried to put these issues on the public agenda. And I'm a little bit excited, I have to say, because I think that there are some very important developments, and I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to be able to talk about those today. And my co-panelist, John, made reference to the fact that the speech from the throne that was read in September of this year made reference to the fact that the federal government plans to introduce a disability inclusion plan that consists of 3 main components: a new disability income benefit, a robust, their words, employment strategy for persons with disabilities, and a new way of determining eligibility for disability programs and services. So I'm going to talk very briefly today about the disability income benefit and what it might look like. We don't know yet exactly what it will be, but there are some important questions to consider. I also wanted to mention that I did look at this program in some detail and the possible design components in a primer, and you should have received the link to that primer in the materials that you have for this conference. I wrote this primer for the Institute for Research and Development on Inclusion and Society, IRIS, and so some of the details that, as I said, I won't have time to address today, like amounts and clawbacks and those kinds of things, are discussed in that primer for anybody who's looking for some of those details. But today, what I would like to focus on are 3 main issues or challenges that I think we need to address when we're looking at a new disability income benefit. And they have to do with the purpose of the program, they have to do with the design, they have to do with who might qualify, and and the broader context. So let me just talk briefly about those 3 areas. First of all, the purpose. It was interesting because the speech from the throne mentioned that this new disability income benefit was going to be modeled on the guaranteed income supplement for seniors. And what I found fascinating about that particular announcement was that the government actually said how it planned to do this. And typically in throne speeches, you don't see any implementation details. Basically, what you see or hear has to do with the government vision, what they plan to do. But actually how they plan to do it is not usually laid out in a throne speech. And I thought that was an important signal to the disability community that, perhaps we should carve out our conversation, or at least focus on some of the elements that are relevant and some of the lessons that we can learn from the guaranteed income supplement, because there are many different ways to design an income security benefit. And I talk about these other ways in the primer to which I just referred for anybody interested, in some of the other design options. But if we are actually going to be modeling a benefit after the guaranteed income supplement, then it's important to look at the opportunities that are present in that particular program, and then, of course, some of the challenges. And I think the first thing to look at is, what is the purpose of the guaranteed income supplement for seniors? It was introduced in 1967, actually as a temporary benefit. It's permanent now, but as a temporary benefit to make sure that nobody over the age of 65, or no senior in the country, would be living in poverty. And together with its twin program, the Old Age Security, the Guaranteed Income Supplement raises everybody up to a certain standard of living. Now, whether you consider that adequate or not, that's a whole other question. And again, it's something that I address in the primer. But the purpose of it is to ensure that nobody falls below a certain baseline. And I think that's a really important point, because we're hoping that the disability income benefit will do exactly the same and will begin to address the very deep poverty that we see among hundreds of thousands of Canadians with disabilities. But what the guaranteed income supplement does not do is pay for very high extra health-related and disability-related costs. So if you're, for example, somebody over 65 and you need to make modification to your home or your vehicle, or you require some mobility aids, for example, or technical equipment, or even medications, that program, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, is not sufficient to cover those additional costs. Those are covered in a number of other ways through various programs. And if we look at what are the lessons, what can we apply to this new disability income benefit, I would say the following: that level of benefit will not be sufficient to cover the additional costs related to disability unless they're quite minor. And it's really important, in my view, to make a conceptual distinction between the new income benefit and then the additional costs of disability, which must be addressed in some other way. And it's really important to ensure that we don't see any level of government saying, well, now there's a new income program in place, we can take away these services because you can pay for this. That will not be the case. This new benefit will be intended to help offset basic costs like food, accommodation, basic transportation, utilities, but other costs will have to be dealt with in another way on the disability support side. And let's not forget that agenda. That's a very messy, complex system, and we're going to have to keep working on it. Extremely, extremely important. The second lesson, I think, is that the Guaranteed Income Supplement is part of a broader family of benefits. The retirement income system consists of private pensions that you may have received from an employer, or your own RRSP, or maybe even an RDSP, registered disability savings plan, or you could be getting a benefit from the Canada Pension Plan or Quebec Pension Plan. And basically what happens is your income from all these sources is pulled together. And if there is a gap between your income and the level that is set by the Guaranteed Income Supplement, you will be raised up to the level of the Guaranteed Income Supplement and the Old Age Security. But all the programs that are currently in place remain in place. And again, if we apply this lesson to the disability income system, and John mentioned that there are a wide range of programs in this system, and by the way, the primer again describes those major programs. If we apply the lesson, what it means is that we're likely going to keep the disability income system that we have. And I use the word system advisedly because they don't really work like a system. They're all financed and administered and, run in very different ways. But we have those programs in place. And at least in the short term, we'll probably see those programs remain in place, because it will take a lot of work and a lot of refinancing, a lot of reconfiguration to begin to move some of the existing programs into the new program. We do have to, though, figure out the interaction among those programs. For example, we have a Canada Disability Savings Grant and bond that are paid to lower income Canadians. Will those remain? Will those be, scooped up into the new program? What about social assistance? The welfareization of disability to which John refers is shocking and should never happen in the country. But it does. And eventually we'd like to dismantle welfare. But in the short term and in the interim, those welfare programs will likely remain in place. Let's at least make sure that people who are on long-term social assistance have access to this new benefit at the very, very least. So we'll have to figure out all that family of benefits and how they figure together. And just finally, very briefly, I think the third challenge is eligibility. With a guaranteed income supplement, we have level of income and age as the two criteria. We will have probably the same for the new disability benefit. You will have to, your earnings or your income will have to fall below a certain level in order to qualify. The disability benefit will likely be for people between the ages of 18 and 64, because at age 65, you go over to the retirement system. But even though it would be directed toward people of working age, you should not have to work or be able to work in order to receive that new benefit. There should be no employability requirements. If you want to, or if you're able to, that would be great. And we'd like to see as few disincentives as possible, but it should not be a requirement to work. The big challenge will be the disability screen, and there will be a disability screen on the benefit. That's probably a given at this time. And what will that look like? That's a very complex question, because all the social models of disability are hard to translate into very practicable eligibility criteria. And we've seen all the challenges related to the disability tax credit. That's the closest measure that we have in the country to using a social model of disability, believe it or not. And we know that there's so many problems with that. So at the very least, I think what we should do is go with the current COVID benefits. If the COVID emergency benefit required eligibility around disability tax credit or Canada-Quebec pension plan disability benefit, or any disability benefits provided through Veterans Affairs. At the very least, we should start there. Let's open up the door even more to people on long-term social assistance. Let's even think more broadly about people on workers' compensation and any number of other programs. But that, I think, will be our major challenge in terms of this new benefit. So I want to conclude just by saying I'm feeling somewhat optimistic. I think this is a really important start, and I'm hoping if we can look at the guaranteed income supplement as our model, I'm hoping that we'll really be able to reduce disability among Canadians reduce poverty among Canadians with disabilities. On the long term, over the longer term, I'm hoping that this new program will create a foundation for much more robust reform of the income security system so that we don't have people with disabilities living in poverty in Canada. Thank you.
Good day. Thank you so much for the opportunity to appear before you today to present some of the findings from our study of the impacts of basic income in the Hamilton area. Today, I'll present to you some of the outcomes of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot as they compare with existing government support programs. To begin, I will start by providing a sketch of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. A basic income is a no-strings-attached income support program that is given to members of society largely unconditionally. It is simply provided to them as a consequence of their citizenship. Recipients do not have to prove they're looking for work or demonstrate a health condition to government caseworkers in order to be eligible for benefits. Ontario's basic income pilot was one of the largest in the world to date, studying the impacts of basic income upon a population of about 4,000 citizens in 3 different test sites across the province. The pilot was designed to test basic income as an alternative to the existing Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support programs, the 2 pillars of Ontario's income support model. The main purpose of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot was to test replacing the broad policing, control, and monitoring that is so endemic in government support programs with a more generous wage floor that would be distributed to low-income members of society. In other words, the basic income pilot allows us to compare the experiences of recipients of existing social assistance programs with the notion of basic income. And that's what we'll try to do today. Approximately 4,000 participants, oh, sorry, maybe we can edit that bit out. I already repeated that, I'm sorry. The pilot was designed to last for a period of 3 years, was made available to individuals between the ages of 18 and 64, and was restricted to low-income persons. Payment amounts were approximately $17,000 for a single person and about $24,000 for a couple, subject to a 50% clawback for those who worked for pay. Individuals with disabilities were entitled to up to $500 in additional support each month. And so ultimately, this represented approximately a 20% increase for most over ODSP earnings and about a 50% increase over OW earnings. However, as we all know, in July of 2018, the government announced the premature cancellation of the pilot, along with all associated evaluative activities. The cancellation represented a missed opportunity to understand how basic income could improve the problem of rising income equality in society. In an effort to fill some of this research vacuum, researchers at McMaster University and Ryerson University attempted to capture the experiences of recipients through a survey that recruited 217 participants in the Hamilton area and about 40 interview participants as well. Of those participants, 85 indicated they had previously received OW or ODSP. So that's 85 of the 217 that participated in our survey. Today, I'll provide you with some of the highlights from our study of basic income recipients from both the basic income sample more broadly, as well as from the OW and ODSP group. Okay, so we'll provide you with some cross-tabulated results, which were provided in the paper that I circulated. It should be noted, however, that our study can in no way replicate the full results of the basic income pilot. Our study relies upon self-reported data, it explores only the Hamilton region, and does not have access to the sample of recipients that a full study would have had. Nevertheless, it offers a depiction of many of the benefits experienced by recipients by comparing their experiences during the pilot to their conditions before. So now we'll take a look at how Ontario Basic Income Pilot recipients who received OW or ODSP, so that 85 of the 217 people who participated in our study, to look at how they fared on basic income. So here are some of the things we found. Among those who had previously received OW or ODSP, we found that nearly 2/3 reported an improvement in overall health. About 60% said they were more physically active than before basic income. Nearly half said they did not need to visit the emergency room at the hospital as often. About 2/3 said they found it easier to afford drugs and medicines. More than 60% said they found it easier to afford professional mental health therapy. More than 2/3 said their mental health improved. Nearly 3/4 said they experienced stress less often. More than 3/4 told us they felt more confident. Nearly 80% said they had a better outlook on life. Similarly, nearly 3/4 said they relied on food banks less often. More than 60% said they were able to socialize with friends or family more often. And approximately 2/3 told us they were able to transport themselves around the region more quickly and more easily. During interviews, we heard numerous stories from recipients with disabilities about the ways in which the basic income pilot impacted their lives. Just to give a few examples, for one woman, basic income allowed her to recover from her cancer surgery at home without having to work to keep her apartment, which is something that she would have had to do otherwise. One injured worker was able to attend a retraining program to find alternate work. One family was able to use to afford a lift for their daughter who suffers from a physical disability. One woman with fibromyalgia was able to purchase a bed to help with her pain management. Another young woman with mental and physical health issues was able to leave a job in which she was being abused, largely as a consequence of her condition, to attend a master's program in an area that allowed her fulfillment and personal career growth. We heard from several people who said they were unable to access mental health supports before, but were able to access professional counseling while receiving basic income. Now, while basic income has been criticized as functioning as a disincentive to work, our results from the entire 217 person sample suggested the opposite. We found that about 69% of total recipients, 69% of total recipients, not about 69%, were employed in the 6 months before the pilot. About 1/4 of those who worked before left the labor market during the pilot, but even those who left the labor market often did so for reasons that were either personal or based upon or educational. And so many of those who left the labor market experienced considerable benefits as well. For some, receiving a basic income meant they could take chances on a new job or career. So it was critical in smoothing out the gaps for people in between jobs that they might have experienced. Several took up self-employment opportunities. For others, it meant the freedom to leave a job behind where the employment relationship had become toxic or unfair or even abusive. Some continued their education with the hopes of finding better employment in the future. Another common pattern was for recipients to report moving from low-paying, dead-end type jobs to jobs with better working conditions and improved long-term opportunities. Several participants decided to use their benefits to spend more time with their children and family members, or in a number of instances, we found that individuals were able to look after sick relatives. That was a major finding. Many reported moving to higher paying and more secure jobs. For a significant number of participants, basic income, in short, proved to be transformational, fundamentally reshaping their lives as well as their sense of self-worth and their hope for a better future. In addition to the additional money that recipients received, recipients were also able to free themselves from the surveillance model of income support systems, allowing for feelings of freedom and independence. Many recipients recounted that basic income gave them the ability to plan their own lives in a way that was consistent with their objectives and their personal needs. We also found that basic income had considerable benefits for individuals with disabilities. Basic income allowed some workers to leave jobs that affected their mental or physical health. And for many, this meant the opportunity to go back to school for accreditations in areas that are consistent with their needs. And as I said, for others, it meant the opportunity to purchase a new futon or perhaps an electrical chair to help with their physical health needs. For others, it provided essential extra income, allowing them to recover from long-term and temporary medical conditions that made it difficult for them to work. So like I said earlier, it smoothed out these gaps that can be created by an inability to work in order to look after one's health or the health of a family member. However, our research shows that basic income has considerable benefits over existing support programs, suggesting it has the potential to improve the lives of individuals living with disabilities. Thank you so much for your time, and I'd be happy to receive any questions you might have.